Okie dokie. Let me just go. Good afternoon and welcome to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM. Each week I invite an expert from the world of business to share their knowledge, insights and tips so they can help you with your business challenges. If there's a topic you'd like discussed, or if you feel that you can make a contribution, please email me at yourbusiness@dublincityfm.ie and perhaps we'll be chatting here one day soon. And my guest today is a corporate behavioral psychologist who helps leaders translate strategy into lasting behavioral change. She's had the privilege to work with many of the global companies, including Heinz, EY, Roche, and GSK, Google, and Samsung. Wow, there's a stunning list. And she also focused on the human aspect of the fourth industrial revolution, helping leaders help themselves, their people, and their businesses embrace opportunities by tapping into our human competitive advantage over technology. Happiness, optimism, playfulness, and empathy. Thank you very much. Empathy, there's the one I'm looking for. I'm delighted to welcome Gerrie Hawes to the You and Your Business studio. Hi, Gerrie.
Hi, Alec.
My goodness, that's some introduction. That's nearly the show finished already. So, but not to worry. Let's take you back, as I always do with my guests, to their first and last year in school. Let's go back to your last year in school and tell me what's going on in your mind. Are you the academic or are you heading off for fun around Europe?
I was one of these lucky kids that was sort of quite into everything. So I went to a normal state comprehensive school in Suffolk in England. And I was doing maths, chemistry, physics and biology. I was head of the sixth form council. I was involved in drama. I had a little radio show. I was doing all kinds of stuff.
You were certainly a busy person. So where was that going to take you off to?
Well, I was going to do medicine. That was definitely, I was going to be a doctor. That was my absolute aim. But it turned out that I spread myself thin. And the advice that I got from my school, was that, you know, I could do those 4 A-levels. So why not? Well, actually, that's one of the lessons of life, right? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Right. And really doing 3 A-levels would have been better advice. I didn't get the A-levels I needed. So I decided to take a year out and retake one of them, which was an adventure in itself.
All right, tell us a bit about that.
So I disappeared off to Holland. Well, I disappeared off to Holland for a year. That was through some, my dad was a social worker. He used to take groups of people with Down syndrome on holiday. And one of the people that he met ran a centre for severely handicapped people, and they needed a general dog's body, and I was that woman. So I became their Manuel. I didn't speak a word of Dutch.
Perfect.
I worked in the bar. I did whatever was needed, and also I got to experience how amazing Holland is for supporting people with all kinds of abilities. So yeah, it was an interesting experience. Retook chemistry, didn't get what I needed again, had to have another rethink, and started looking at universities and what my options were. And at that point, I fell in love with Nottingham University and started exploring psychology as a subject.
Interesting enough, I mean, you talked about sort of the Dutch and how they sort of were very good at looking after people who had particular challenges. Has that changed in terms of the UK, how it reacts or responds?
I think it depends on the investment in that. I think that's a whole other subject, really, that I think what has changed is that people are starting to realize that there is a mix of abilities, and whether that's neurodiversity or whether it's physical diversity, all of those different by driving inclusion, by encouraging diversity, you really actually benefit as a whole. So that's true, but whether there's more support for people with a mix of abilities, I think Holland probably still leads the way on that.
Fantastic. So anyway, let's drag you back to Nottingham. This is a place I believe you fell in love with. So talk about Nottingham and what you started doing there.
Nottingham's a great city, and it's a place that it's a great university. There's actually 2 there, but I went to University of Nottingham, and it's also a place to play hard. And I think that's probably been true of my life. I like to work hard and play hard. I think it's actually an important part of life. I love Dublin for that reason too, right? So I looked at subjects, I looked at psychology, and I found that there was this unusual degree which was combining psychology and zoology called behavioral science. It's now quite commonplace. It was a rare subject at that time. And it was a very interesting subject because it was an emerging topic. So what I later discovered by dating somebody who was studying medicine, that medicine involves a lot of learning and regurgitation and not necessarily a lot of your own thought until quite a lot later, and depending where you go in the discipline of medicine. In behavioral science, still now, but definitely then, it was an emerging subject. Nobody knew the answers. And so you had to come up with your own theories and just be able to debate and discuss and put forward your own thoughts. And that served me very well throughout the rest of my career.
That must have been a beautiful way to learn. So as opposed to having to just bury yourself in books and try and remember everything that's in there, you're more into a sort of debating type situation and analyzing what's happening around you.
Yeah, I think that's been true of how I work as a practitioner in corporate psychology as well, that you ground yourself in the science. So I'm very much science level. What's the research? What's the science? But then also what's the application? What does it really mean? And how can I use it? And so that combination is what really caught me as a subject and why I still use it now.
So your brother was to have an influence on your life and to steer you off into a direction. So tell us a bit about that.
Okay. Well, here's a lot to answer for. So with that mix of A levels, those science based, then you know, if you're looking at subjects, if it's not medicine, then it's probably engineering. And he did engineering. He was older than me. And when I was thinking, well, what do I do next? He actually advised me to study a subject that I really wanted to do rather than what I should do. And he said, you know, if you do a subject that you should do, you'll do fine. You'll come up with a reasonable degree. But if you do something you really want to do, follow your passion. Then if you follow your passion, you'll do really well. And I nailed it. I mean, I got a first, but I don't think I didn't feel it. I was just enjoying it. It was just an amazing subject to explore.
And I think that there's a very valuable lesson for so many people out there, that find something you really love and you'll never work a day in your life.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I really love what I do. I get to work with the leaders of amazing companies and really understand what their strategy is, and then how and help them shape that strategy, but also translate that into what does it mean for your people? Make that connection between the theory, the strategy, but also what behaviors need to change, what mindset needs to change, and how can we build a future together?
So I understand at some stage you went back home just to live with the parents. So they were going to kick you out of the nest at some stage, I hope, with all of this knowledge that you had inside you there.
Yeah, even in those dark days, then, you know, people think, oh, the young people, they come home too soon. Well, I did it as well. After university, I went home, lived off my parents for a year, lucky them, and also got loads of jobs to earn enough money to go traveling for a year. So I was working as an usherette in a theatre and working in a shop, but also I was a scientific officer for the local water company, which meant I spent quite a lot of time on sewage works. But I do talk about this because I find the sewage work time is really insightful, because the people that work there, mainly guys. In fact, I think I was probably the only woman that rocked up most of the time at the sewage works. The people that work there without them, we would be knee deep in something very unpleasant. And it's a lesson for all businesses and leaders to realize those people, you know, when their kids go to school, what does daddy do? He works at the sewage works. It's not full of love, excitement, and passion. It's like, well, you know, that's what his job is. And it was a lesson for me to realize these people, they're the salt of the earth. They really make the difference. And businesses really need those people to understand the importance that they deliver to their business, but also to society as a whole.
Just from your psychological background, how do you assess how these people are motivated to go to work every day?
Well, I think it's easy to forget that one of the motivations is because you've got to put food on the table, right? That is part of it. And so you've got to have that basis understanding that you can be all excited about your leadership role, but for a lot of people, this is just their job. However, if they understand that there is also a purpose and a society impact in their job, then it has an added advantage. When you're talking to your family or your let's say your kids about what you do, if you can explain this is not, I don't just do it for the money, I actually do it for this as well, then that's an added motivation. And it's the biggest challenge businesses have got. One of the big challenges they've got, COVID's thrown it a little bit, but one of the big challenges they've got is to retain and keep the people that are really good. And it's not just about money, it's also about purpose and really understanding why people enjoy and value their job and what they deliver to society.
Yeah, and it's amazing so many people either A, don't understand it, and or B, don't recognize the people who do this sort of work and how important they are in society.
Yeah. And it's interesting though, the big challenge that leaders have right now is actually creating connection and cohesion in their teams. So although I talked about, there's used to be a lot of talk about purpose, but I think the biggest challenge leaders have right now is when you're remotely leading, how do you connect your team together? How do you bring them so that there is cohesion? So I don't normally get involved in Christmas parties, but I've just done a little video about 12 easy ways to have a little Christmas party online that helps you get engaged. It doesn't have to cost you a lot, but it does help you engage your people and connect again. Say thank you for one hell of a year, right?
So the 12 Days of Christmas, as created by Gerrie.
Exactly. Find it on YouTube.
So anyway, we've moved you on from the important world of water treatment onto traveling again, and you seem to be hell-bent on traveling the world. Tell us more about that and the experience that you enjoyed.
I have come to understand that I'm an adventurer, right? So I've done lots of different things in my career, and I just find I love to explore what's going on, how things work. So traveling around the world was an amazing experience. I learned a lot about the world and how different cultures work. I also find myself going into lots of different supermarkets. I find supermarkets an amazing insight into the cultures of different organizations. And I find supermarkets are a fascinating way to understand how different cultures prioritize products and how they interact. People at their absolute basics normal. That's a bit of a problem with online shopping, right? You don't get to have a really good snoop around different supermarkets. So after traveling for a while, then I thought I'd better get a job, and I was applying to different companies, and one of them was Clark's, the shoe company.
Yes.
And they're one of the few companies then, and I don't think really anybody's doing it now, that rather than taking you into a particular discipline in the organization, every graduate trainee spent 3 months making a pair of shoes. What an amazing experience.
Wow, fantastic.
You got to see every aspect of the organization. It was designed that way. So you started with grading leather, learning about how to make a pair of shoes, and they wove in how to cost a pair of shoes, marketing, sales, manufacturing. And I really think there's a trick being missed by organizations, particularly if you ever go into marketing or a leadership role. Understanding how you impact different aspects of your business is really useful.
Sure. No, that's a fantastic model, and I'm surprised we don't see more of it.
Yeah, and also I discovered an organization that's really passionate about what they do, and that's been interesting because I discovered it's not always the case. It was about time I moved on from that, so I went to work for an FMCG company. I went to work for Hawes in London. Part of it was getting into FMCG, part of it was a bit of a London fix. Both really interesting and fun. And also I discovered that the FMCG sector, there were a lot of people who had just sat at a desk looking at a computer screen. Well, I know we're doing that a lot at the moment, but just there's not a lot of passion. There wasn't a lot of passion and enjoyment in work. So hopefully it's changed, right? But that's how it was then. Yeah. So one Friday I got a phone call from somebody who worked at Adidas, and they'd been recommended me to go and join them. And I went and had a little look. They were based in the Adidas headquarters in Germany, and I landed myself a rather wonderful global role looking after kids' footwear. Oh, and got to travel all over the world again, traveling, but from a business point of view, seeing manufacturing in Asia, doing sales in all over the place, including the States, South America, Russia, all of that experience. And it was a really interesting way to understand how international business works. And I get involved in that too.
Yeah, it must be interesting because from the whole behavioral side of things, you're getting to see how different groups, different parts of the world interact with products and how they buy. It must have been fascinating for you.
Yeah, one of the fascinating things is when you work in the headquarters to understand it has to be influence on the countries. You can't control all the people all the time, which is a shame, right? It'd be nice to if you could control all the people all the time, but you can't. So that was an amazing experience. It's a real play hard, work hard organization at Adidas, and a real thrill. But I was hankering to get back to the UK. Actually, whilst I was at Hines, I discovered there were these thing called consultancies that did what looked like the fun bit of the job. And I moved back to London to work for an innovation and strategy agency. And that's when I moved from what's called client side to agency side. And started working with all kinds of different brands. And that's when I started to do more of the leadership advisory role. It's a learning curve, but it was very interesting. However, I told you my career was a bit varied.
This is it. It's fascinating for people. And you're just typical of what we get. So many people have done so many things in their life, but it usually leads them to where they are today.
Yeah, well, what happened whilst I was working at the innovation agency, that I had a little idea that was tapping me on the shoulder that it had been in my mind for a long time, that somebody needed to sort out kids' food, particularly baby food. Heinz has a huge manufacturing centre in Wigan in England, and when you walk in it, there's a fragrance, there's a smell to the place. And I could smell it in all Heinz products. And it started me wondering, well, I wonder if in Heinz baby food, there's anything about that might encourage whether there's anything in baby food that might encourage kids to eat that food. Now, I don't think there was anything done deliberately. I think it's just how the manufacturing system worked. Yeah. But I decided madly that I needed to get involved in this. And I decided to set up my own food business. So after working,
well, I should do, of course, yeah.
And I think there is something about the world of possibilities. I think we can all have an influence. You don't have to think, oh, somebody else needs to do that, because if you wait for that, something might not happen. Yeah. So sometimes you just need to go, right, I'm going to do this. And I decided if I was going to do it, I was going to do it properly. So I took some time out. I wrote the business plan. I got venture capital investment, which is a whole interesting experience. And
it was.
And managed to get into all of the major supermarkets in the UK, and was doing okay. Right. But it's hard, right? It's hard when you're the small minnow, and it's a hard place to be. And
it must have given you a great experience, because having to deal with supermarkets who operate in a totally different level, and also you're involved in manufacturing or outsourcing, all of those disciplines involved in business.
Yeah, it was fascinating. The supermarkets were harder then. I think there's been a lot more understanding of nurturing startups and early stage businesses. But when you're competing against those enormous names, you just don't have the pockets. Even with venture capital investment, your pockets aren't deep enough to do that level of promotion that's needed. So yeah, it was hard. I wrote a book, I had a TV show, I had all kinds of stuff going on. I was doing lots of promotion on it, because problem with babies, they keep growing up, so you have to keep promoting and marketing to your market. And I was at a point when I had to decide whether I was going to spend another 5 or 6 years, hopefully to the point of it selling, or whether I was going to take a step back and go, okay, it was an interesting experiment, but I'm going to do something else. And I chose to step back. Because there was a lot of pressure on margins. I was going to have to compromise the product, and I just had to make a decision. It's also relating to wanting to have children as well. So at that point, it was either spend all my energy on the business or potentially have to make some other bigger life choices, which I did. So I took a bit of time out on that, and that's when I stumbled across a new area of the events industry that was emerging at that point.
Okay, go on.
I told you it's a bit of a role, my life. So I had been working in strategy, but the event sector were identifying that that conferences and business and employee engagement wasn't really connecting to the high level strategy. It was death by PowerPoint.
Yes.
And a company called Involve, or and it used to be called the EventWorks, they were trying to connect the strategy much clearer to what was happening when you engage employees. And they took me on to connect their, to help organizations connect strategy with what actually happened. Now, what happened within the first week is that the person that was heading up GSK, GSK as a
pharma, large pharma.
Yeah, they were the account manager for GSK left, and I was given that role. So all plans completely out the window, and I learned went on a slightly different journey, but that happened. But it's at that point then I really got to walk into the boardrooms of organizations and say, well, what is it what's the strategy, and what is it you want your employees to understand, and what needs to change? And that's what I've been doing until fairly recently.
All right, another change, perhaps.
Another change. So I'd like to talk about the fourth industrial revolution, because
why not? Let's do that.
Because more and more organizations that I speak to, there's the current strategy, and then there's the 10-year strategy, which is, hang on a second, what's happening? The fourth industrial revolution is hitting AI, machine learning, cyber, robotics. We need to rethink how we work as a business. And it doesn't matter whether you're a manufacturing business where you have a robot that builds a car, or whether you're a legal firm or an accountancy firm. Technology can do the complex and the mundane.
Yes.
So the big question is, where does that leave us as humans? And that's what I focus on right now. So what I help organizations do is look at the human competitive advantage and prepare us for a new era of work.
And so let's explore that a bit further in terms of what you're suggesting to people. I mean, we know computers can do a certain amount of complexity, but nothing like the human mind. So are we overly panicking, or are we going to have to find a new place here?
Yeah, we do have to find a new place, because actually computers can do a lot more than we realize. So actually a computer can process and come up with your recommended tax route, for example, or your legal route. They can do it quicker, faster, and potentially more comprehensively than a mind can. And that's also true of health. If you've heard of Dr. Wilson, it can look at all the symptoms, it can look at science from across the world and come up with a very clear diagnosis for you. And it's only going to get better and stronger. So where does that leave us? Where does it leave us as humans? Well, one route is hell, right? We are redundant, we are useless, we're going to sit on the sidelines. And to be fair, for every other industrial revolution, the first, second, and third, that was the fear. The fear was machines are going to take over. What I talk about is, well, yes, machines are going to do those things. In fact, maybe humans weren't really very good at some of those things, but what we are really good at is 4 things, which is inner contentment and happiness, which is, there's a huge market in there, there's huge opportunities in it. And also as leaders, you need to explore your contentment. And it's proven from Harvard University that happy employees make better decisions, they sell better, they work better, and you retain your good people. The next one is optimism. So it's no good having a pessimistic dystopian look to the future. You need to have a vision of what's possible. And if you can look to what's possible, then you need to tell your people, look, this is what our business is, and this is where we can go. So that involves understanding where you can go and how to leave your strengths. So if you know your core business is going to be made redundant by this dystopian idea, well, then what can your business do?
Exactly.
Then the third bit is playfulness, and this is where humans really come into their own. I think I've heard you say on a previous conversation that when you get people laughing, that's when the magic happens. And in laughter, when people start laughing, when people start to be creative, that's when you start to push the boundaries of innovation. if we play with an idea, it doesn't have to be silly, can be, but it doesn't have to be silly. When you start playing with an idea and become creative, that's when you start to really identify the opportunities that can stand there. And the final bit is about empathy, is about connecting with your employees, about connecting with each other, and also connecting with customers. If you understand what your customers really need, then you can start to identify the business opportunities that are there for you.
Wow, there's a lot in that to consider. So a lot of people are going to be kind of worried about this now in terms of their jobs, but have we any sort of timescales on when you see some of these major shifts coming along?
The Industrial Revolution is happening now.
Yeah.
So we're in it. So there's no point being scared of it, really. It's happening. What we need to be is prepared, and it does impact business. It looks at, you need to look at rewarding the right behaviors rather than the ones that don't serve you well. But also it affects education as well. We need to be educating our kids to have the human strengths rather than the things that are going to be taken over by machinery.
But aren't we already struggling with this whole aspect of machinery overtaking the human aspect with smart devices and people disconnecting from the world in which they are existing in and trying to connect into a world in which is in a virtual space?
I think it depends how you look at things, right? Because in some ways, we're more connected than we've ever been. So I haven't been able to see my parents in person for months because of COVID, and yet I see them regularly. And without technology, that wouldn't be possible. People are connecting in gameplay, online gameplay, in a way that they couldn't. If you can find your tribe online. Whereas if you're in a small village, you may think, no, you can't find anybody like you, but there are people like you somewhere in the world. So I think you can see it as how awful people. When I was a kid, if you watch too much television, you got when I was a kid, if you watch too much television, you got square eyes, right? Yeah. And in the same way, there's this fear that technology can take you to the wrong place. Actually, technology is amazing, but what we do need to be aware of is that by embracing it, by making the most of it, we can impact the old algorithms, we can impact where the opportunities are, and also what products are created. We're so early in the stages of social media that, of course, things are going a bit weird at the times, but as time progresses, we will embrace it in a better way and use it for us, not necessarily against us.
So you believe we'll be able to appease the Luddites out there as we go forward?
There'll always be Luddites, right? They've always had, well, ever since the Luddites, there's been Luddites, right? But there is, but I think there is, for those that want it, a wealth of opportunity to be had. It's fear that gets in the way, right? So don't be fearful of it. Work out where the opportunities are and how you can use your skills and your organization skills to make the most of it.
I suppose, as I've been listening through this whole interview, what next for Gerrie? You keep changing, you keep morphing. So I'm wondering what's on your cards going forward.
Yeah, I think that's part of the fun, right? But the fourth industrial revolution isn't going away. So who knows? And I'm actually open to interesting opportunities in that way, because why wouldn't you? That's possibly the thing that I would love your listeners to hear, that don't let things hold you back, right? If you think it's possible, then get involved and do it. Have a go, explore it. If it doesn't work, then find a different route. You'll learn stuff as you go that will serve you ultimately.
If you were to give advice to, I suppose, a lot of SME mid-sized companies out there who probably struggle more than the large corporations, have you any sort of special messages or maybe areas to focus on that could help them?
What I would say is really, really spend time with your customers and possibly your suppliers as well. So what you will do isn't necessarily what you do now, but there is opportunity for you. So how can what you've created has served your people. You've identified that there is a need. How else can you deliver that? If that is going to be affected by technology, then how else can you deliver that need that isn't necessarily the product that you have now, or the services that you have now.
Isn't it amazing with all this technology? The usual complaint is people are so busy at the coalface that they don't actually get a chance to stand back and look at the future.
Yeah, I
Again,
wish
would you?
I said that. But yeah, I think. Well, the other interesting thing is that I believe there's going to be a resurgence of really hands-on skills as well. There's
Sure.
stuff that the crafting skills are also going to be really important. But yeah, sometimes you need to stop. And that's true. You know, many of us have been working really hard this year to find a path through a crazy year, which is going to carry on for a while longer. And in fact, has probably accelerated the fourth industrial revolution faster than we'd anticipated. What we need to do is also stop, think, listen to other people, and see where the opportunities lie.
Well, certainly as we come to the end of this interview, where can people find out more about you, Gerrie?
The simplest way to find me is on LinkedIn. Just contact me that way. I'm in the process of setting up a website and doing that other tech stuff. I keep getting busy, which is wonderful, but it does get in my way.
Because you have the cool face, is that it?
Yeah, exactly. I need to stop. Exactly. I need to take some of my own medicine. But absolutely, LinkedIn. My name's Gerrie, Gerrie. Look for a bright yellow background and you'll find me.
And of course, your surname is Hawes, Hawes.
That's right. It's a funny name.
Yeah. Listen, what a great way to finish the show. Special thanks to our guest, Gerrie Hawes. Oh, you got me nearly fully on that one. Actually, let me just stop that for a second. Let me just repeat. What a great way to finish the show. A special thanks to our guest, Gerrie Hawes, for coming into the You and Your Business studio today. Thanks also to Sam on Sound. The podcast Today show will be available on dublincityfm.ie from tomorrow. Thank you for your company. And please remember to join me, Alec Drew, again next week at the same time, 12:30 right here on 103.2 Dublin City FM for another edition of You and Your Business. Good. I can edit that bit out. This is what happens. That's why you leave the little spaces in there to edit them. How was that for you?
I don't know if it went bing a couple of times.
I'll get that out of it as well. Yeah, there's.
It was all right. It's all right. I think I should have nailed a few different messages, but it's fine.
No, it's all about you anyway. So it's your own personality, you know. Listen, people will listen to it as much, and you can take the pieces out of it that you want and use them as suit you. Yeah.
So are you as part of your plan public speaking as well? Is that what you're doing?
Been doing it for years. Past president of the Professional Speaking Association here in Ireland, and
I thought. Are you?
Yes.
But you're doing coaching as well? But you're speaking's your main business, right?
No, coaching be the main business, and speaking is part of it. Just a bit like 95% of the world of professional speakers. There's only about 5% of them really make it their living from speaking. It's a real challenge around that. It's interesting. You talked about a number of things that I'm passionate about. The fourth industrial revolution. I speak about some of that as well. And I'm interested in the whole psychology of business. One of the things you were talking about there is the disconnect between organizations, head office and their branches. I wrote an article only recently about it. What did I call it? One organization, two cultures, three solutions, or something like that around it. But you've seen it. I mean, you know.
And it serves, because a lot of the work I do is the leadership teams are based in the head office, right? So I actually use that time at